right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 19 of our podcast, Plays Well with Others, or how to build and participate in highly effective teams while actually enjoying doing it. And first off, I got to start with this episode's coming out on Friday, and it's been a little bit of an impromptu hiatus. We've had some challenges over the last couple of weeks with internet and electricity, particularly around my house, which is not out in the middle of nowhere, but I'm also not in the middle of the city. So we had some electrical
You're really
outage
close
last
to the
week.
middle of nowhere.
Well, it's middle of nowhere adjacent, we'll say. But we're in the process of modernizing our network infrastructure, and our local electric company is starting to provide fiber internet. And as a result, they have taken out my electricity last week and then my internet again this week, and just a whole litany of challenges that led us to simply drop the Wednesday episode. So, whereas this was supposed to be episode 20 on a Friday, it is now episode 19, the second attempt. But I think it's appropriate because the topic that we set out to cover today really stems off of an article that Jess, that you found, that is related
Yeah,
to, in certain ways, the middle of nowhere and internet access. So
it
why don't
does
you run
relate.
me through
Yeah.
that?
So I have this friend that's a consultant with our company, and he used to work for John Deere, and he kind of clued me into how John Deere over time stopped being a manufacturing company or a company that, created just equipment and became a technology company. They actually consider themselves a technology company. And that really is highlighted by the article that I found that came out, gosh, I guess just May of this year, where they're working on getting a satellite network stood up by the end of this year, which I just find so fascinating. A John Deere satellite. I mean, I hope they paint it green and they have it like, with like the little yellow accents, whatever satellites they put up there. But I'm sure they'll be using ones that already exist. But the whole point of it is they have, over the course of the last several years, I mean, I found another article back from 2018 where they were talking about the John Deere lab, where they pull in, the best and brightest to help them figure out what new technology they can come out with. They have really cool capabilities where, they can have target which areas of your field need to have, fertilizer, and which areas need to have pesticide, and they can target specific locations for the pesticide to reduce the cost for both the farmer but also improve the environmental impacts. It's astonishing what's possible. But now they're looking into this satellite network because a lot of the equipment that they use require some sort of a internet connection, right? And large chunks of Brazil and America don't have access to consistent internet. So through their John Deere satellite network, they're going to have the capability of offering that to these remote farmers in these remote areas so that they can use their equipment in the way that it was designed to be used, which I just find all of this fascinating. I mean, I'm from rural Texas, and John Deere is, something I think of like you wear your Wranglers and your John Deere hat. Like, it's just not something I equate with Silicon Valley. And yet here we are.
Well, I have to start with, you said you're hoping that the satellites are painted green and yellow. Elon
Yes.
launched his Tesla into space, playing Space Odyssey. I think these satellites need to be playing Freebird. That's the more important aspect.
But what
But
if they're doing both?
fair. But I think what that reminded me of was, I read an article from Reuters the other day, which I'll drop in the show notes, that the FCC released a metric that says in the US, 8.3 million homes and businesses don't have access to high-speed broadband. And that's a big number, but the interesting thing is that that's like 250,000 more than last year. So the number
So
went
weird to
up.
me. Why is it going up?
Well, I gotta think
Shouldn't it be going
it's
down?
well, I gotta think it's gotta be related to the real estate market. So demand over the last 5-10 years has been incredibly higher than supply, and so we're just building these communities, these large swaths of
So
townhomes,
you think it's
and
new construction that's getting tossed up that's skewing the numbers more?
well, maybe so. People are moving further out. Like I'm one of them. In the last 5 years, I moved out to a place that didn't have internet, but now technology's finally catching up to COVID. And I've got my T-Mobile trash can 5G router that works a treat most of the time until somebody does maintenance and turns the power off on the cell tower that services my house. It really it only it rain when it rains it pours. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it seems to happen very
A lot.
frequently until I get fed up, and then it smooths out long enough for me to forget about it. But it makes me wonder if developers and municipalities are trying to cash in on the housing demand, and they're building without the infrastructure support or the architecture that's ready to service broadband in the capacity that's being needed.
I wonder if like codes haven't caught up to what the current consumer expects to have available though, right? I mean, you now have, codes for electricity and sewage and et cetera when you build a house, but is there any code around having internet access? Probably not. So it makes me wonder if that's just something that our building requirements haven't caught up to.
There's actually several. I want to say it's several states that have passed legislation that treats broadband internet like a utility, so that it's managed at
Yeah.
it's managed like a utility. So there are requirements for access. There are requirements for service levels. Obviously,
Post-COVID world with a
we're not
lot
doing
of
that out
people
here.
working remote, right?
Yeah,
But in a
right.
post-COVID world where everyone's working remote, that sort of thing becomes mandatory in order for you to be able to do your job even.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish I had the metric on how many people are now working from home, which I probably could Google that if I was quick enough. But I wonder how many people are actually working from home now post COVID than they were beforehand, and how many folks have gotten in a bind because they commuted into an office that doesn't exist anymore. But
I know
I did
I've
read.
hired people post-COVID that didn't have a good enough internet service who've had to upgrade or whatever to be able to do their job from home.
I'm telling you, the first year and a half of COVID, I worked exclusively from home on a hotspot from my work provided iPhone. And let me tell you, that thing got hot. But another article that I pulled up, I screenshotted yesterday off of LinkedIn Business, but the headline is Neighborhoods Reap Work from Home Rewards. And the topic was that office office parks, big office buildings, as we've known, has been a challenge. Renewing leases and all of that. But a lot of residential areas are starting to see a benefit from people working from home, and they're building more commercial spaces, more businesses, more gyms and restaurants and whatnot that you typically would see in an office area, but now people don't go to offices. And
That's
so
really interesting. I
we
hadn't
got
thought
kind of
about
off.
the ramifications.
Yeah, we got kind of off on a rabbit trail on that one. But to
We
go
do that.
back to Jess's topic of John Deere specifically, but in general, businesses kind of changing their spots to focus
Yeah.
more on things that keep them relevant in you could call it a post-COVID world, but in reality, it's an ever modernizing world, ever
It
modernizing tech
is.
landscape. The the thing that's interesting to me is, I've said before in business settings that at some point everyone needs to become a technologist and everyone needs to be responsible for technology in an organization. And that's what we generally think of digital transformation as. But when you look at a change like John Deere underwent, where they're obviously still making tractors and farm equipment, but they're
Yeah.
focusing more heavily on the modernization and the innovation that's required to keep them relevant. They're focusing more on the technology than they are on the farm implement.
Taking step and step forward, they're looking into data analytics and how AI can help assist in the future as well. I mean, they're definitely on a path that a lot of cutting edge technology companies are on. They're doing the same sort of, utilizing the same sort of tools.
Right. And I think that's part of the interesting bit is the more we modernize and the more accessible this modern technology becomes, like AI being a service offering on Azure or on Google or AWS, all of these technologies are becoming more accessible to individuals, to small businesses, and they're not ridiculously overpriced. So that begs the question, at what point in your business trajectory, your roadmap, do you start considering how am I leveraging technology, and should I be leveraging technology more than I already am? I did
Well,
actually
yeah,
get
for sure.
I did actually get a few metrics on that, which I, I find interesting. I like to believe that there are people out there like me that like the numbers and the percentages, but there's a couple of articles, a couple of studies that I'll source down in the show notes too. But looking at small and medium business, there's something like 93% of small business owners report using at least one tech platform to help run their business, which is not unreasonable. There's Square, there's Stripe, there's all of these payment POS services that help you with your taxes, help you with your payment information and all of that. It's almost a requirement now. Like you're just not.
To be able to accept a card, you're limiting your customer base significantly if you only accept cash.
Well, right. And to build a real, like you would see at a big box store, to build a real POS, it's exorbitantly expensive and it's way overhead. And anything else is you're not going to be able to do business. You're going to say cash only? Probably not. No. But out of that 93%, it was they broke it down a little further, and they looked at power adopters, so those businesses that are using 6+ tech platforms, and they looked at low adopters, so 1 or less. And 84% of the power adopters saw a significant increase in profit, sales, employment, etc. So the numbers are there that say you should be adopting technology as a small or medium business, but where the rubber meets the road is in discernment. And
yes,
I don't know that I can be on board with 6+ technology platforms as a small business. I don't know what that looks like.
All right, we got to find one and interview one.
I'm serious. Like,
to your point of
how
discernment, though, to your point of discernment, though, I do think it's like, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because I think on a previous podcast I talked about Simon Sinek. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. I hope I am. He wrote the book The Infinite Game, and I am fascinated by his description of what a lot of companies do in terms of playing a finite game in a non-finite situation. Finite game being football, where there's a set period of time, there's set rules, there's a winner, there's a loser, period. So if you are a company playing a finite game, you're going, well, we've got the lowest prices. We're the top rated in the industry. What are you basing that off of? Is everybody basing their own requirements for being the best off of the same thing you are? No, there's no agreement between companies in the industry, in any industry, of what the best looks like. Those are basically you playing a game that nobody else is participating in. You're playing by a rule book that nobody else has. So the finite game is not what we're doing here as a company. You're looking at the infinite game. And when you start looking at it that way, what you're trying to do is survive. And I think we use the example of Blockbuster. They were not playing the infinite game. They were the best in what they did. They stuck with it. They were like, this is what we do. Netflix came and made them obsolete. And now we have a world where Netflix is going to become obsolete. But instead of, getting channels from your cable provider, you're getting subscriptions on your Apple TV. It's a very interesting transition we've undergone. And I imagine somebody very soon is going to come out and blow all the other ones out of the water with something newfangled. But that's the point, right? Is having a view into what you should be doing based on the trends of the environment that you're in, capitalizing on the introduction of new technology to advance your company and keep your company relevant. And that's what John Deere did. They're going, okay, a tractor is not going to be relevant in 2023. A tractor by itself might work for a small little farm, but even smaller farms are using upgraded technology to, reduce the amount of water that there's using, to reduce the amount of pesticide that they have to use to make their farms run better, faster, and more efficiently, to reduce the staff that they need to run these things. Technology is all part of that. And so they changed what they were producing to be able to capitalize off of what was available so that they remained relevant. And I just find that to be such a mixture of, how do you do this correctly? How do you move forward and stay relevant?
Well, I think that's the double-edged sword of using technology as a differentiator in the market. So you're talking about the infinite game. How do you stay relevant? How do you survive? A lot of us, when we go in, whether we're starting a business on our own or we're joining a company as a department head or you're setting strategy, you want to find your differentiator. What is it that makes you different from everybody else? And mortgage companies have differentiators. Is it offering more products? Is it better rates, better prices?
Super fast.
Right. Like what's your shtick? But if you are using technology as your differentiator, it becomes an absolute requirement that you have that awareness and discernment, because it's the Blockbuster example. If you're the best on the block, and if you're the best on the block and you're doing something better than everybody else, then if you're not aware of what's going on in your industry or in the world, then you're going to miss your opportunity to continue to grow, continue to evolve, and some new kid's going to come eat your lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're kind of, hitting another point there too with you keep going back to that word you used before, discernment. When you start to compete against another company, right? Like, so you're trying to take somebody's market share, you're trying to compete against another company. I think that narrows your sight. It narrows your ability to play well in this infinite game, right? So if you're looking at trying to stay relevant in the industry, you really kind of need to be looking at, what do my consumers need? What's the next new technology? What's cutting edge? What's out there? What can I capitalize off of? And play your own hand. Don't base your hand off of somebody else's. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dance with the one that brung you, right? You've got to do the thing that you can do and you can do well, rather than focusing too much on your success being someone else's failure.
I've seen companies focus so heavily on what other people are doing in the industry that they, hire to those numbers, or they try and fit themselves into a box based on what they see other people doing. And I think there is some relevance in making sure you're not being ostentatious. I'm not saying there's not, but there is also, you could potentially be hurting yourself because you don't necessarily understand their business model, why they've done the things that they're doing. So you could be hedging yourself into a corner that doesn't make sense for what makes you unique, special, relevant.
Yeah, well, that's game theory, right? So the prisoner's dilemma, right? So I am having to Google this because I don't remember exactly how it works. But the idea is that you have a group of prisoners and they're given a choice, and they're given a choice without knowledge of the other prisoners' choices. And if those choices align, then they get their freedom. If they don't, then they continue to play. So the game theory aspect is, how do you act in the most self-serving way, or the most beneficial way for yourself, not knowing how others are going to respond. And I think one of the responses is tit for tat. So that's a strategy that we use in combat, in business, and anything. You respond with what the other person plays. So if they escalate, you escalate. If they are rude, then you're rude. And you go back and forth, and you respond without memory of what happened last. You simply respond with the other's behavior. It's an approach, right? But when you talk about your differentiation, or the approach to business being one that you want to focus on, keep your nose to the grindstone, keep your eyes on the target of what you can do. You are kind of trying to figure out, how do you continue doing business without focusing only on the conflict with taking out your competition.
Right.
But you've kind of got to have one eye on the competition, right? Like, it's like you said, it's the numbers game. You don't want to do exactly what everybody else is doing, because that's not valuable. But you do need to know what everybody else is doing, so that you can be in front of the trends. If somebody else is starting to offer a product that is beneficial, then yeah, maybe you should be working on that, or working on something that'll upset that product.
Yeah. I mean, there are going to be some things that just become table stakes in your industry. And if you happen to be the one who introduces the new table stakes, then well done.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the idea. It's terrible when you're chugging along doing the thing you're doing, and somebody else completely disrupts the industry, and now you got to do it. It's not terribly innovative anymore. You're just implementing a feature set, or you're buying something off the shelf, and it is what it is. But so I'm interested. I know we've kind of both done the same take the show on the road idea, or like, we're going to go implement the modern way of doing technology, of doing engineering and product engineering. But when we talk about this idea of the infinite game, I think we can apply it to individuals as well as companies. And maybe Simon has it in his book, but I'm thinking around the idea of, don't get in the habit of just doing the same thing over and over again in your career. Your goal is survival, I suppose, in the most literal sense. But if you're keeping an eye out on the changes in your industry, the changes in how people, the philosophies around your job and your business, how do you connect those two ideas? Because I think they are similar. Like, you've got to constantly be differentiating yourself as well as doing it for your company, right?
Well, you need to know what you're about, right? And that comes, I think, agnostic of the role that you're in. Why are you participating in whatever company, whatever role that you're in? Why do you do it? Why do you go to work every day? And this kind of gets back to another episode we did where, we kind of talked about the intrinsic value that you get out of your job. We get that you have to collect a paycheck, but if you're going to your job 100% just to collect a paycheck, you're not going to be performing at your best, or honestly, you're not going to have that engagement, that feeling of belonging and participating in something bigger than yourself. And it's just draining to exist that way. I've done it before. I've had jobs where I've just literally went to get a paycheck, and you try and make the best of it. You try and get through it, but it's not something that it's not a career. It's not you participating in the corporate world to make a difference or to have an impact or to do it for some sort of a reason. And so I think that's where, you start to succeed as an individual. Monetary success is potentially a measure that you can use to determine whether or not you're being successful in your career, but I don't think it's the only standard. And that's why I think you need to have a personal mission statement, a personal understanding of why am I going to work? What am I trying to achieve? And I personally care about making sure people are communicating well, and I like making sure people are having a good time and enjoying the work that they're doing. I think that we often have a lot of negativity and toxicity in corporate cultures in America, and my goal is to show that you don't have to be a toxic person. You don't have to have a toxic environment in order to be successful and effective. And that goes with me from job to job. No matter where I'm at, I'm still trying to reach the same goal of setting a different standard for what being a corporate colleague really looks like and what being a leader looks like within a corporate environment.
Yeah, and that's episodes 2, 3, and 11 for those of you following along
Talked about
at home.
this a lot.
So it is a core aspect of who we are as people, and our philosophy about leadership, our philosophies about just being a person. Like it's something that you should strive to do, to be a good person. You should strive for that in a civilized, polite society, right? But
I think so.
I appreciated that you took the question that direction, because it was not the way I was thinking about it either. So when I'm thinking about like personal differentiation, and maybe this is just a side effect of me being an engineer or technologist. When I got into the business, they said, "Well, don't worry about anything, because if you don't like it, it'll change." And that's so stinking true. There's a new framework, new programming language, God help us, a new JVM language seems like every week that becomes the new hotness. But when I think about it from a discerning standpoint, there are watershed moments that happen likely in everyone's industry. Being in technology, it happens a lot, but there are some that are just these huge bellwether changes that you either consume, you're prepared for, or you're not, and you get left behind. I think about the AI movement. We've been talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning for decades, and then seemingly overnight, ChatGPT comes out, OpenAI comes to the forefront, and it just something about the weather and the place the zeitgeist is in, everybody adopted it, and it took off like a wildfire. And so now, as a technologist, if you're not familiar, at the very least, with the tenets of AI, how it works, and what it means for businesses going forward, for strategy, you're getting left behind. And I don't even mean just a little bit.
And I would venture to say it's not just technologists. I mean, me as a product owner, I need to understand what this is capable of so I can understand how products need to be looked at in the future, because they're going to evolve to consume this new technology, or you're going to get left behind. And that's true for, I think, most roles now. At least from a leadership level, you need to understand what this technology can do, how it can be integrated, how consumers are going to be utilizing it, how your competitors are going to be utilizing it, because it's out there now. And if you're not thinking about it and you're not taking it into account as you plan for your future, you're going to miss the boat.
So we're circling that around quite nicely. If you're following along with your typical formatting, we set out the abstract, or the summary at the beginning. We talked about the John Deere article and how John Deere is constantly changing to remain relevant and to keep up with the times. And we did go down some bunny trails there in the middle, but all interesting topics that maybe we'll revisit in the future. But coming back to a close, the core tenet here that we're espousing is you got to be aware of what's going on in your industry. You got to be aware of what's going on around you. In whether you're, if you're a retail business, you should know what's happening in the communities that you serve, understanding where your demographics are going and what products people want. You got to be aware of these things, but you can't focus so much on beating the competition that you miss the important changes that allow you to be innovative, that allow you to continue to be top dog.
I think that helps with marketing as well, because if you're marketing, we're the best, the lowest, whatever, that draws in a certain crowd. That might get you a certain level of attention. But if you're linking what you're selling to how it's going to be consumed, you've suddenly upped your game a level. I mean, it's kind of like looking at Microsoft versus Apple. Apple's just really good at marketing. At least they were for a long time. They approached each release completely oblivious of what their competitors were doing, at least from a release perspective. And it all came out in, this is how you're going to consume it. This is this is what it means to own an Apple. This is how, you feel is owning a Tesla is not just about having a car that's electric, right? It's owning a brand. It's owning something different. So there's something else to think about there when you're branding your company and marketing your company as well. I feel like Simon Sinek goes into some of this as well. If I can find that, we can link that in there also.
I kind of that might be another good episode topic. So maybe let's put that down in the note file. But so wrapping us up, this has been episode 19 of Plays Well with Others. Thanks for the patience for coming back, presumably. I'm recording this, so I don't know if any of you actually do come back, but I suspect you will. I have faith. I trust you. You're good people. So go ahead, come back. If you're listening to us, if you've made it this far, really appreciate it. Again, always appreciate your engagement. Drop us a comment somewhere. Let us know where you're listening from or who you are. Give us a share, rate, subscribe, whatever your podcast platform offers. It really does help, and it gives us some idea of what you like and what you don't like. Thanks for listening.